in Genesis chapter 3 was built on a translation that hides something far more disturbing. Today we are going to look at what the Book of Enoch reveals about the true nature of the serpent, and I promise you, by the end of this video, you will never read Genesis the same way again. Most of us grew up with a simple picture. A talking snake wraps itself around a tree, whispers a lie to Eve, and humanity falls. End of story. But here is the problem. That picture does not hold up when you go back to the original Hebrew text, and it completely falls apart when you bring in the Book of Enoch, one of the most influential religious texts of the ancient world that was deliberately excluded from the Bible most of us read today. Let me start with the Hebrew because this is where the first clue hides in plain sight. The word translated as serpent in Genesis chapter 3 is nachash. Now on the surface, yes, nachash can refer to a snake, but Hebrew is a layered language, and this particular word carries multiple meanings depending on context. The root of nachash connects to concepts of bronze, copper, and shining metal. It can describe something luminous, something radiant. Some scholars have argued that a more accurate rendering of Genesis 3 verse 1 would be something like, "The Shining One was more cunning than any creature of the field." That changes everything. We are no longer talking about a reptile slithering through the grass. We are talking about a brilliant, radiant, intelligent being. And this is where the Book of Enoch becomes essential to the conversation. For those unfamiliar, the Book of Enoch is an ancient Jewish text that was enormously popular among early Jews and Christians. It was so respected that the New Testament book of Jude directly quotes from it. Fragments of it were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, proving it was circulating centuries before Jesus. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church still considers it canonical scripture to this day. This was not some fringe document. This was mainstream religious literature for the people who shaped Judaism and early Christianity. So what does Enoch tell us about the serpent and the fall? The Book of Enoch introduces us to beings called the Watchers. These are angelic entities, divine beings, who held positions of authority in the heavenly realm. According to Enoch, a group of these Watchers rebelled against God by descending to earth and corrupting humanity. Their leader is named Shemihaza, but among them is another figure whose role connects directly to the Genesis story, a being named Azazel. Now pay attention to what Enoch says Azazel did. He taught humanity forbidden knowledge. He revealed the secrets of weaponry, of metalworking, of cosmetics, of sorcery. He opened doors that were supposed to remain closed. Does that sound familiar? A powerful being approaches humanity and offers knowledge that God had restricted. That is exactly the pattern we see in Eden. The serpent tells Eve that eating from the tree will make her like God, knowing good and evil. It is the same template. A divine being offers forbidden wisdom, and the result is catastrophe. Here is where it gets even more interesting. The Book of Enoch describes these fallen watchers as radiant, supernatural entities. They were not animals. They were not ordinary creatures. They were beings of light who chose rebellion. And remember what we said about nachash, that Hebrew word that connects to shining and radiance? The Apostle Paul seems to confirm this connection when he writes that Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. The being in the garden was not crawling on the ground when it approached Eve. It appeared glorious, wise, and trustworthy. Think about the curse God pronounces in Genesis 3:14. "On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life." If this creature was already a snake, already crawling on its belly, why would that be a punishment? A curse implies a loss of something, a reduction in status. This being was stripped of its former glory. It went from an upright, magnificent form to something degraded and earthbound. The Enochic tradition supports this reading because it presents fallen angels as beings who lost their heavenly position through rebellion. Now I want to connect another thread because most people miss this entirely. In the Hebrew Bible, there are beings called seraphim. These appear in Isaiah chapter 6 as fiery, winged creatures surrounding the throne of God. The Hebrew word seraph shares a root meaning with serpent and fire. These are burning, serpentine, angelic beings. They are part of the divine council. So when we encounter a nachash in Eden, a shining serpentine being of great intelligence and cunning, we may actually be looking at a corrupted member of this same class of heavenly creature. Not a garden snake, but a fallen seraph. The Book of Enoch gives us the theological framework to understand this. It presents a world where angelic beings have real agency, where they can rebel, where they can corrupt, and where their punishment is severe and eternal. Enoch chapter 21 describes a terrifying place, a narrow chasm extending into an abyss of fire, prepared as a prison for these rebellious angels. This is remarkably similar to what the Book of Revelation describes as the fate of the ancient serpent, that being who deceived the whole world. And speaking of Revelation, let me draw this full circle. Revelation chapter 12 explicitly identifies the serpent of Genesis. It says the great dragon was cast down, that ancient serpent called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. The text reaches all the way back to Genesis and tells us plainly that this was never an animal. It was a cosmic adversary. But here is what most churches never teach you. The Book of Enoch provides the missing middle chapter of this story. Genesis gives us the brief encounter in the garden. Revelation gives us the final judgment, but Enoch fills in the gap. It tells us about the society of these rebellious beings, their hierarchy, their crimes, their offspring, and their punishment. Without Enoch, you have two bookends with nothing in between. The watchers in Enoch did not just fall from heaven in one moment. They conducted an organized rebellion. They came to earth, they took human wives, and they produced hybrid offspring called the Nephilim, giants who terrorized humanity. These Nephilim consumed animals, then turned on humans, devouring them and drinking their blood. The earth cried out to God because of their violence. This is the backstory to the flood of Noah. God sent the deluge specifically to cleanse the earth of this corruption that began when heavenly beings crossed a boundary they were never meant to cross. And what was the first boundary crossing? What was the original template for this rebellion? It was Eden, a divine being approaching humanity with forbidden knowledge. The serpent in the garden was not an isolated incident. According to the Enochic tradition, it was the first act in a much larger cosmic drama of angelic rebellion against the created order. This also explains why the ancient world took the Book of Enoch so seriously. Early Christians like Justin Martyr and Irenaeus referenced it. Tertullian defended its authority. The Book of Jude not only quotes it, but treats it as prophetic truth. These early believers understood that Enoch provided crucial context for understanding the nature of evil, the origin of demons, and the identity of the serpent. So why was this book removed from most biblical canons? By the 4th century, influential church fathers like Augustine and Jerome began to reject it. Some scholars suggest this happened because the book raised uncomfortable questions about the nature of evil and angelic free will. Others point to the growing desire for a more streamlined theology. Whatever the reason, the result was that most Christians lost access to a text that their spiritual ancestors considered essential. But the Ethiopian Orthodox Church never abandoned it. Their biblical canon includes over 80 books, and Enoch remains among them. For Ethiopian Christians, the connection between the Watchers, the Serpent, and the fall of humanity has never been a mystery. It has been part of their scripture for nearly 2,000 years. So let me bring this all together. The serpent in Genesis was not a talking animal. The Hebrew word nachash points to a shining, intelligent, supernatural being. The Book of Enoch reveals that such beings, called watchers, existed in a hierarchy around God, and that some of them chose rebellion. The pattern of their rebellion, offering forbidden knowledge to humanity and crossing divine boundaries, mirrors exactly what happens in Eden. The curse pronounced on the serpent implies a loss of former glory, consistent with a fallen angel rather than a natural creature. And Revelation confirms that this ancient serpent is the same cosmic adversary who will face final judgment. The story you were taught as a child was not wrong exactly. It was incomplete. The real story is bigger, darker, and far more terrifying than a talking snake. It is the story of a war in heaven that spilled onto earth, a rebellion that corrupted all of creation, and a plan that God set in motion from the very beginning to undo that corruption. If this changed the way you think about Genesis, drop a comment below and let me know. And if you want to go even deeper into the Book of Enoch and what it reveals about the spiritual world, make sure you subscribe because we are just getting started. I will see you in the next one.